Censorship is one of the big issues of our time. We know this. Many people don't seem to understand why I use, swap out some words here or there. They get very annoyed when they see YouTubers and other podcasters changing out words here or there. It's our attempt to get around the restrictions that our hosts, totally fair and totally free speech respecting hosts, impose upon people, while not imposing those same restrictions on corporate media that they are trying to allow to dominate these platforms. And as Americans, I find this personally, culturally grossly inappropriate, since we have ingrained in us this idea that we have the right to speak about any topic under the sun that we wish, and in pretty much any way we wish, as long as it follows basic kind of cultural norms that are often wise unwritten. And those norms don't really permit us to censor people. Catholics, it gets a little more complicated, but I've noticed, many others have, that at certain times of the year, Christian voices on this platform kind of get the thumb goes on the scale in the other direction. Right around November 1st and lasting until early January, sometimes right after December 25th, the platform suddenly stops recommending Christian channels as much to their own audiences. That seems a little weird at that time of year to do it, but remember, usually channels like this one and many others will remind you that, yes, gift giving at that time of year is a good and just thing, but it's not the reason for the season, as we will often say. And it could simply be that at that time of year, our hosts don't want to undermine their advertisers that much, and so they kind of put their thumb on the scale a little bit. Has happened to me literally every single year for the last almost decade on this platform. But this censorship takes other forms as well. I covered the story of the Italian news blog Messa and Latino, who, Latin mass, basically what it means. They are a news aggregator. They post 5, 6, 7 articles a day on their website about news in the church, typically in Europe, but sometimes reaching out beyond there. And they'd been involved in the publishing of a book, in the promotion of a book by a priest who worked in the Roman Curia under Benedict XVI. And it was essentially denouncing the ambiguity and errors that we saw under Francis and that are still continuing today. And as soon as they did that interview, they pulled the plug on their blog. Well, pressure has been put on them, and I will show you here. Messa and Latino was restored. Here it is. That's their website. It's back. A lot of interesting articles here. I'll go over some of them in the future. But it's interesting that they are back. And to get some details, we're first going to go to Messa and Latino's reporting on this. We'll get some context from, yes, a LifeSite article. If you hadn't heard, John Henry Weston seems to be back running the place, at least for the time being. We'll see how well that goes. But let's go first to Messa and Latino's own reporting on this, because not only are they just going to report on it, they're going to give you some details that I don't think anyone else is going to give you, including how they've submitted questions to the Italian parliament. Yeah, this gets really sorted really quick. So posted on Thursday, yesterday, Langone and others, and the Messa and Latino affair, Bergoglianism is over. That's odd. What does shutting down a Catholic blog by secular authorities have to do with what they call Bergoglianism? It's a good question, isn't it? Here are the details. This gets weird real quick. Quote, since Pope Francis's death, it seems the Bergoglians have never existed. A few days ago, they seemed to reappear in a different guise, in the guise of Google. A platform suspended the blog Messa and Latino. Bergoglio and his followers were bitter enemies of Latin. But then, fortunately, Google, backtracked. Where have the Bergoglians gone? Since Pope Francis's death, it almost seems as if they never existed, as if the enemies of Jesus' friends, the Jesuits, had been suppressed once again, to Pascal's delight. Father Spadaro kisses the slipper of Guru Michelangelo Pistoletto and has his picture taken in secular garb. Has he defrocked himself? Heaven forbid. In short, it should be a good time for us Christians. But a few days ago, Bergoglianism reappeared in another guise, even in the guise of Google. A platform owned by the IT giant has suspended the Messa and Latino blog. a reference point for Italian Catholics who love the liturgy. Bergoglio and the Bergoglians were bitter enemies of Latin. Out of hatred for the language of their fathers, they destroyed religious orders, devastated seminaries, humiliated priests and ordinary faithful with their trademark methods of violence and lies. Cardinal Sarah said, quote, the plan to erase the traditional Tridentine Mass seems to me a diabolical plan. Of course, Latin is a burning offense to the devil, on par with the crucifix and holy water, and yet good news and a sign of the times. Google has just reversed its approach. The algorithm has understood that Bergoglianism is over, and the blog has been reactivated. Non prelevebunt. Now, they are linking this directly to the ideological winds controlling Rome, and frankly, it's still controlling Rome. Why would they do this? It's a good question. In fact, it's such a good question that the people of Messa and Latino submitted a question to the Italian Parliament. It's in Italian, so I can't read it for you here. It's in Italian and a image. Guys, put it in text on your page, and then some of us could translate it. But they asked these questions to the European Parliament. So this is going beyond just Italy. This is the European Union's Parliament. Because it turns out some of these suppression things may be violations of the European Union's laws on speech. Google may have stepped in it. The time to the Chamber of Deputies on our situation by the Honorable Morgante, whom we warmly thank. We hope that this gross affair is at least temporarily over. And they point out that when it was all removed. So let's go to get some context from this. And this is why we're going to turn to LifeSite now. Michael Haynes posted this to LifeSite to give you some idea of how and why all of this happened. Under the headline, Leading Catholic Site Restored After Google Suddenly Removed It. Messa and Latino had been abruptly taken down on July 11th over an unspecified hate speech allegation. Unspecified. So I'm going to tell you here about how it works for anybody on any Google platform. If I have a video demonetized or if I have a video removed, the latter I don't think has ever happened, but it's been a while since the former, but it does happen. That's why I'm so careful. When that happens, they'll tell you violated a rule, but never how. The law should change. They have to spell it out for you. What you did, how you did it, give you a timestamp, and maybe a remedy to fix it. But they don't do that. And it's not just on this platform. It's on all Google platforms. It's obscene, really. Like, how are you supposed to know out of all the rules if you can't figure out when you break them and how? Here are the details. After nearly 2 weeks offline, Google has restored an influential Catholic website following a review into an alleged violation of hate speech. As of July 23rd, Messa and Latino has returned to its normal online operations, publishing news and analysis on the Catholic Church, especially with an emphasis on Vatican affairs. Messa and Latino, arguably the foremost Italian language site of its kind, had been abruptly taken down on July 11th. The brief email sent from blogger.com, run by Google, informed Messa and Latino that the site had been taken down with immediate effect due to an unspecified violation of its hate speech policy. No further information was given, and Messa and Latino noted today that they're still without any more precise information about what caused the site's temporary removal. The real reasons are unknown, the editors wrote. We can only assume on the basis that in the weeks immediately preceding the single post had been removed but then restored. Always with the same very generic motivation, that some malevolent reader, we know someone who bragged about it, targeted us, repeatedly flagging our content. Yes, a public figure bragged about this, going after them. Hence why they made oblique references in that oddly written post. This is the second day in a row, by the way, that I'm using Italian news sources, and they're written in a much more poetic, fluid kind of way. Some people objected to my report yesterday from an Italian journalist claiming it was AI generated. It was not AI generated. You go read that author's post going back years on their news platform, you'll find that they've been writing in that same weird style for a long time. And it's probably has more to do with Italian cultural norms and the way they write than we are used to in the United States, which tends to be much more sterile writing, as you're seeing in Mr. Haynes' reporting, which is a more professional journalistic style, which is much more sterile than a lot of the reporting you get out of Europe. That's not a dig at Mr. Haynes either. It's just the cultural norms for how things are written. says the Italian language site Messa and Latino has been online since 2007, with the editors having published 22,000 articles on the Catholic Church news, with a particular focus on Vatican affairs. The site, though perhaps less known among the Anglosphere, was highly influential, serving as a key resource for Vatican observers due to its reliably well-placed sources. To give you an idea, they were one of the first websites to report on Traditionis Custodes, long before it was released. They knew that it was coming, and they tried to warn people and were blown off about it until it happened. Messa and Latino had garnered over 1 million page views last month alone and has been at the forefront of breaking key stories in recent years, including the scandal surrounding Father Marco Rupnik, allegations of potential conclave rule changes, Traditionis Custodes, and a public billboard campaign defending the traditional Mass. Following the July 11th strike and removal, the editors filed an emergency court appeal. The story garnered notable media interest, and according to the editors, it became the subject of 2 parliamentary questions. One to Strasbourg, that's the EU, and the other in Rome, for Italy, because freedom of the press, in definitive, affects everyone. The editors hit back firmly at the Google-driven censorship, writing that, quote, by hitting us, the system revealed that no one is safe from this creeping and surreptitious censorship, which, despite the absence of any crime, it is subcontracted to unnamed private oligarchs, to billionaires in sweatshirts burgeoning. Not even a cooking site will be safe during the day in which it suffered a flood of malicious signals against the roast recipes from some vegan fanatic, end quote. In other words, all you have to do is not like the contents there, and you could flood them with reports to get them shut down. And that's what they're alleging happened in this case. So they've been restored. That is unequivocally good news. Now, the thing is, we're not free of this risk in the U.S., obviously. I mean, let me know in the comments if there are channels you followed until they just disappeared into the ether, poof, gone, and they were likely taken down for saying mean things. There is an attempt to do something about it here. This comes from The Federalist with the headline, Bills aim to stop big tech, big government from silencing speech again. There is an allegation in that Messa Latino article that it's either someone in government or at least someone with, some oligarch, billions basically, with billions of dollars, pushing to have them removed. Probably if there was anybody in any government doing it, it was someone in the Vatican pushing to have Messa and Latino shut down. Now, this article was January of this year, and it details an effort by, I'm not going to go over this whole article at all, but by Senator Eric Schmidt, a Republican from Missouri, who is the latest to be taking up the challenge to get the government to do something about this problem. Been hearing a lot for the last decade about government wanting to do something about this, and they haven't done anything. Maybe that'll change this year. Details for the article, quote, Senator Eric Schmidt, Republican of Missouri, was among the first to see evidence of what many Americans suspected, big tech colluding with the Biden administration to silence speech. Now he's reintroducing legislation to hold government bureaucrats and social media giants accountable for their sins of omission. The Missouri Republican, who was Attorney General of the Shawnee state in 2022, joined with then Louisiana AG Jeff Landry in suing the federal government for pushing social media companies to censor viewpoints, generally conservative viewpoints, that had conflicted with the selected experts' messaging on the 2020 problem and its alleged solution. Missouri v. Biden, as the First Amendment lawsuit was known, was filed at the time, took aim at the alphabet agencies and the social networks believed to be taking pages from Orwell's 1984 to shut it down. And it goes on, talking about all that sordid history involving the silencing of those platforms, or by those platforms of people. We need this kind of protection. And it needs to be something that keeps these companies from doing the same thing in other places too. Got to reassert a little what we'll call corporate nationalism here. That if you're a company that is, filing the predominantly your taxes in the United States, and you are an American company and you need to be treated as such and you need to follow certain laws, even abroad. That's what needs to happen. We'll see how well that works out. Now, unfortunately, as that Messa Latino article suggests, censorship isn't only an issue from tech, and often it comes from government, and we will put the Vatican here in that category. Because we have a censorship story that broke yesterday, and I don't think this came from the Vatican. It wouldn't surprise me if it did, though. A couple of eminent theologians in the United States, at least one of which has a show on EWTN, were just fired by the Archbishop of Detroit. For kind of no reason whatsoever, except that he was critical of Francis and accusing him of spreading ambiguity and rejecting the church's moral teaching, thus undermining the authority and teachings of the faith and putting souls at risk. He just got fired. And this is sending shockwaves around because, people are kind of figuring out now that a lot of these new bishops, and this was one of Francis's last appointments, a lot of these new bishops are terrible, absolutely terrible. And it's fact that they managed to climb through the hierarchy to the point where they're now ordinaries of dioceses is raising concerns from people. We go to the National Catholic Register, not exactly a hardcore outlet or anything. The headline, "Shake up in Detroit. New Archbishop fires Ralph Martin and Eduardo Echeverria." The dismissal of Martin and Eduardo Echeverria, who had both critiqued what they perceived, as doctrinal ambiguity under Pope Francis, is already generating controversy. Of course it's generating controversy. These guys, they're both very high-profile figures in the church in America when it comes to teaching. They're not flamethrowers of radical traditionalism. These are just typical conservative Catholic voices. They probably have more in common with the Catholic Answers crowd than with Chris Jackson over, over on Substack, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about here. Very mainstream voices. And they got silenced for pointing out the obvious. Two prominent theologians who critiqued what they saw as doctrinal ambiguity under the late Pope Francis have been fired from their longtime posts at the Archdiocese of Detroit's major seminary by the local archbishop, the Register has confirmed. Archbishop Edward Weisenberger removed Ralph Martin and Eduardo Echeverria from their positions at Sacred Heart Seminary on July 23rd. Both theologians told the Register separately. In a statement to Renewal, the Catholic Charismatic Apostolate founded and led by Martin, the theologian described his sudden termination as a shock, noting his 23 years of contributions to the seminary. He wrote that when he asked Archbishop Weisenberger for an explanation, the Detroit ordinary, quote, said he didn't think it would be helpful to give any specifics, but mentioned something about having concerns about my theological perspectives. Pause here for a second. You notice that the censor, that was when we're talking tech and anybody in government of any kind with power, when they do this, they don't like to tell you why. They don't like to give you specifics. You would expect a Prince of the Apostles to give you specifics, to make things unambiguous and clear. He's a shepherd. He's supposed to be a teacher of the faith. You would think that if there's a theological problem, that he would be upfront about it. After all, the salvation of souls is the highest law of the church. And if you are saying that there's a theological problem with one of your seminary professors, that seminary professor, for the good of his soul, should know the errors he's making. Of course, it's also a matter of justice. He should know what he's done. But there's no justice right now. This archbishop is a little different than the tech overlord with his censorship pen. Martin added that he was sharing these details because his colleagues and friends were owed an explanation, adding that he wanted to be truthful, but he did not, quote, want to unnecessarily contribute to current polarization in the church. Echeverria told the Register no reason had been provided to him for his termination, and that he cannot say more due to signing a non-disclosure agreement. When contracted for more information, Sacred Heart referred to the Register to the Archdiocese of Detroit. Holly Fournier, Associate Director of Communications, said the Archdiocese of Detroit does not comment on archdiocesan or seminary personnel matters. The firing of the theologians, which is already generating outcry online, is the latest controversial move by Archbishop Weisenberger since his March 18th installation as Ordinary of the Motor City, following his appointment by Pope Francis. In June, the Archbishop barred 13 parish churches from celebrating the traditional Latin Mass, while also banning the ad orientem posture for Novus Ordo liturgies in the Archdiocese. By the way, that was an illegal move by the Archbishop. It was. You go read the general instruction of the Roman Missal, which is the instruction manual for saying the new Mass. Guess what? There are times where it tells the priest to turn around and face the people when doing specific prayers, as if the default position in the Novus Ordo was, by design, ad orientem. What he was doing was a violation of the governing rules of the Mass. But because we live in a time where bishops are seen as basically the dictator of their diocese, he can get away with it, and he will. So keep these two theologians in your prayers. They probably are going to need it, especially since one of them has an EWTN show. And we know that EWTN has been under the sights of the bishops for a long time. That it was too conservative for them. Even though really it's only a handful of shows on EWTN that is traditionally minded. Most of EWTN is safe content. There's a few shows that aren't safe by the powers that be standards, and it's those that they will come after next. Now, we'll wrap this up here with this from Catholic Culture. They were reporting on this too. This is the relevant part. Quote, both Martin and Echeverria have taught at Sacred Heart Seminary for more than 20 years. Both have also published widely in defense of the perennial teachings of the Church. Martin, who is a regular speaker at national and even international Catholic events, as well as the host of the EWTN show, The Choices We Face, had written in his 2021 book, A Church in Crisis, that Pope Francis was causing widespread confusion by his ambiguous statements on moral issues. Echeverria had recently posted an essay on the Catholic thing, in which he argued that Pope Francis had undermined Catholic teaching on marriage. End quote. As I told you yesterday, we are now in the consolidation phase of Francis's reign. It appears to be, according to cardinals who were in the conclave, the reason Leo was elected. Part of the consolidation phase is to silence opposition and to just let the new status quo set in. I don't think Leo had anything to do with this, but it's pretty clear that the Bishop of Detroit is a full-throated believer in what Francis did. And that's what this is about. You can't have anybody who is going to raise a voice against the new order of things. They have to be silenced if they have any credibility. They'll let your YouTubers go for a while because most of us, they don't have a lot of credibility in the eyes of a lot of people. But man, Ralph Martin, seminary professor, EWTN TV host, yeah, that's what this is about. It's a consolidation phase, the new order in the Church. Curious what you think about all this, so let me know in the comments. Dr. Martin is considered a conservative. By present standards, yes. Conservative in the post-conciliar sense, post-Vatican II sense. Whenever there's a revolution in any kind of place, after the revolution, you get things break down into basically two factions. There can be multiples of them, but then they form coalitions and things. But it's always a sort of we'll call it the push forward of the revolution side. We'll call it the progressive side for just easy language. But there's also the conservative side afterwards. You saw that in Vatican II with Ratzinger being on the conservative side of things, even though by pre-conciliar standards, Joseph Ratzinger was considered a radical. Not as much of a radical as some of the others on the other side, though, like the Cardinal Martinis of the Church. But these are post-conciliar conservatives, because the revolution must continue unabated under the name of synodality, where this dialogue and listening does not apply to people who want to push Catholic morality too much or defend Catholic morality, because, boy, the traditional teachings of the Church on holy matrimony and the James Martin stuff and all the rest are not synodal. They're not too good about dialogue and encounter and walking together, because you can't tell people to repent, believe the gospel, and to stop sinning and still walk together, meeting them where they are. You can't. They're mutually exclusive. Weisenberger is clearly a true believer in this. That's why he crushed the Latin Mass. Now that's why he's cleaning out his seminary professors. Can't have guys like Ralph Martin feeding and teaching future priests things that are too Catholic. Curious what you have to say about this. Let me know in the comments, please. Pray for everybody we spoke about today, including Bishop Ralph Martin and whoever the mysterious bishops or billionaires were in Italy who tried to get Messa and Latino shut down and were very briefly successful at that. Not trying to make you mad at these bishops. Again, they usually do a pretty good job of doing that on their own. Pray for them. Pray for those that they've caused harm to. And as always, pray for the Church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.